So I want to talk to you today about someone that's been discussed in pro-Israel and anti-Israel circles. And there's been some question marks about how she truly feels. And this is the podcast host and presenter, Megyn Kelly. Now, Megyn Kelly has undoubtedly been someone that has articulated very staunch, strong support for Israel over the years, particularly in the aftermath of October 7th. Having said that, there's been some instances over the past few months where she has said some things, or rather not said some things, which has raised a few eyebrows. In particular, not really calling out Candace or Tucker Carlson for some of their, particularly Candace, deeply anti-Semitic views. Now, let's be clear, she's not no one says you have to call out people that say bad things, but she has been either heaping praise on them or saying, this person raised a legitimate point here or a legitimate point there. And it's like, you have nothing to say about their anti-Semitism and nonsense and lies. That's, again, I'm not saying that's something that should mean, therefore she's against Jews. Not at all. But it raises eyebrows. That's all. Because one has to wonder, if you're talking about someone and either heaping praise on them or just presenting them as some kind of legitimate presenter or spokesperson, but you don't have anything to say, especially when you're showing clips of them saying things that are deeply hostile to Israel, but are based on lies and are nonsensical. I would feel the need to, wonder, well, what do you make of that, and how do you feel about that? Especially if this is a presenter that I want to be listening to and feel is a real, really aligned with my values. And then I also saw Megyn sometimes characterizing critiques of people that say lines that are critical of Israel and saying, you're trying to shut down, this is a shutting down debate, and there's this tendency to call people anti-Semites the second that they say anything critical of Israel. There's no doubt that there are some people that will do that, but I think it's a ridiculously overly generalized, unfair characterization. It's a bit of a straw man to say that that's how some or even most pro-Israel people feel about those that are critical of Israel. No, we judge people's actions. We judge people's comments on a case-by-case basis, and we look at what are they actually saying and how serious is it in terms of its truthhood or falsehood. So I remember talking to someone. In fact, I was even talking to one of Charlie Kirk's colleagues, where they said, sometimes one might feel like it's not. If I'm an influencer and I say 95% of the things I say are super pro-Israel, but then I have one critical comment on this, that, it's like you guys all come piling down on us. I said, well, that would certainly be true and immoral that you experience a pile on if you are a staunch friend, but then you say things that are somewhat critical. I agree. But then again, it comes down to the question of what are you actually saying? Because if you are 95%, let's say, supporter of capitalism as an economic model, but then you say, but I also believe in 95% taxes. I mean, people in the pro-capitalism camp will say, we have to call you out on this, and this is really dangerous to be saying that. And they'll say, what are you talking about? I'm 95% of what I say is pro-capitalism. Well, sorry, but you just said something really hostile. So if someone says, I'm 95% supporter of Israel, but you imply that the Mossad did 9/11, how dare you call me an anti-Semite for saying that? Look, I'm not in the job of name-calling, but I will say that is a deeply damaging, dangerous lie that you're saying. And it's the kind of thing that anti-Semites parrot. So, and then people, so I don't like this, that I feel there's a bit of a straw man created about how people in the pro-Israel camp respond to the odd criticism. Yeah, I think actually in the most part, if someone just gives a fair criticism of Israel, a lot of us will say, I disagree with that, here's why. But I think if someone parrots something that is deeply hostile to Israel and Jews and based on a flat-out lie, we're going to call it out. And in fact, we're going to especially call it out among people that have been historically pro-Israel, because it has the danger of turning a lot of people, because they have so many people that are pro-Israel listening to them. In some ways, it's even more important that we have these discussions. But no one is trying to stifle free speech, but we are simply observing what is happening. And I want to talk to you in a bit more detail about what we've observed with Megyn Kelly recently. And this is not to characterize her as in any particular name or anything. It's simply to say, you've said this is how I would respond to that. And for people to say, oh, but you're stifling free speech, I'm not. I'm utilizing my free speech in the same way that you are. So, I want to read to you, first of all, an article by Isaac Shaw in Mediaite, where he spoke about this. And then I'm going to show you some examples. So, he said, no one blinked when Tucker Carlson claimed that the late sex criminal Jeffrey Epstein was an Israeli intelligence asset last year. Carlson's well-documented descent into the anti-Semitic depths of the nihilist right rendered his attempt to turn the controversy over the Trump administration's handling of the Epstein case into a story about Israeli malfeasance, a blip on the radar. After all, it contained all of the requisite elements: money, sexual perversion, and a Jewish antagonist to whip the gullible and malicious alike into a lather. Was there any doubt he would capitalize? But, to the surprise of many, Megyn Kelly also emerged as a purveyor of the conspiracy theory when she told the late Charlie Kirk that she would guess Epstein was connected to the Mossad, and that it's possible that that's the reason everything is getting buried. It was, as it turned out, a sign of things to come. The following month, Kelly hosted Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene for a friendly interview during which she expressed agreement with Greene over her harsh criticism of AIPAC. Quote, I've been very pro-Israel and I've been very defensive of their right to defend themselves, but I've absolutely no skin whatsoever in defending any lobbyist group, including AIPAC, so I'd love to know what they do to get the loyalty of politicians, said Kelly. Because I will say I've had multiple reach outs to me, both from friends and from connected people in DC, begging me to go to Israel with them, and I've said no every time. I'm looking at Israel in a different way right now than I was on 10/8, that's for sure, she added. By the way, I think the reason why people who care about Israel are saying she should go to Israel is because that's where you can really understand what's going on there in a way that you simply cannot from the outside. To quote Douglas Murray, you haven't been. Anyway, Isaac continues, and in the days since Kirk's murder, Kelly has made a point of stressing his frustration with some pro-Israel activists, even though he counted himself among their ranks. And by the way, you should watch my interview with Josh Hammer, where he said literally the night before Charlie was murdered, he was having a Zoom call with Charlie to go through pro-Israel talking points and arguments for his upcoming campus tour. So this lie that Candace Owens is now propagating, that Charlie was 48 hours before his murder, Charlie said he's done with Israel, he's going to turn on Israel. How do you explain his long call with Josh Hammer to plan his Israel arguments? It's absurd. I've seen now firsthand enough examples of with proof in my hand that Candace is just flat out lying. Isaac continues, during one recent episode of her Sirius XM show, Kelly defended anti-Semitic shock jock Candace Owens' post-assassination commentary, which has included false accusations against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Jewish-American billionaire Bill Ackman, as well as instructions to her followers to, quote, be very wary and suspicious of the people who are already telling us to stop asking questions about the Charlie Kirk assassination. Quote, Candace, who's been critical of Israel in this conflict, did not appreciate that we had a foreign leader reading part of Charlie's letter, trying to characterize his stance on Israel without giving it its full measure, because it had changed a bit in recent months. And she's not wrong about that, insisted Kelly during a conversation with Matt Welch and others on the Fifth Column podcast about Owen's claim that Netanyahu had taken a letter Kirk addressed to him out of context. After Moynihan pointed out that Owens is a very, very dodgy witness, Kelly cut off her guest to argue that Candace is, quote, Candace is brilliant. I realise she's controversial, but she's very smart. This is what I'm saying, you know? I'm not saying this is a slam dunk, therefore you are anti-Semite Megyn Kelly, but, I mean, to use that language about someone who, I mean, Dennis Prager himself, who praised Megyn Kelly just recently and hired Candace Owens, has written a whole dossier on Candace Owens' content explaining why it can only be strued as flat-out anti-Semitism and lies. Megyn continued, you don't have to trust her. If Candace is not your cup of tea... Yeah, there are lots of people that are anti-Semites that are not my cup of tea, by the way. That's fine, mused Kelly after another interruption. You know, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. She's not everybody's cup of tea, but I just played you a 4-minute exchange of Charlie saying ... Charlie Kirk says something that is very different than what Candace Owens feels about this stuff, replied Moynihan. He says during that conversation with you that he is a stalwart Zionist. He doesn't like people questioning his commitment to that idea. So, Megyn's language is very, like, kind of morally, kind of making some kind of equivocation, you know. I might not be everyone's cup of tea. Candace isn't everyone's cup of tea. This is way too much legitimizing of Candace, which I find to be unacceptable. If I'm going to perceive you as someone that is very much a friend of Israel and the Jewish people, this is someone that is literally one of the worst offenders today of inciting anti-Jewish hatred in the world. You know, it's that simple. Isaac continued. Now here's where it gets really interesting. On Monday, the New York Post published the full text of Kirk's letter to Netanyahu, which I read out to you in a previous video. Lo and behold, it began with the declaration that one of my greatest joys as a Christian is advocating for Israel and forming alliances with Jews in the fight to protect Judeo-Christian civilization, which Charlie said. Ended with the lamentation that, quote, it pains me to see support for Israel slip away, and he details a comprehensive communication strategy to stop the bleeding in between. Now here's where it gets odd. Kelly had a strange reaction to the revelation that Owens had co-opted Kirk's death to mislead her audience about her former colleague's letter and overall opinion of Israel. Look at what she said. The Charlie Kirk letter to Bibi is interesting for obvious reasons. But if you want to hear Charlie in his own words, speaking to a friend regarding his feelings on Israel and the pressure on him, it's all here on August 6th, she tweeted on Monday night. No filter needed, just listen to him. Now, I have to say to you that this is for me, like, I see now, okay, Megyn is not just trying to act as some kind of neutral reporter. I pick up a bit of an agenda here, because this is the language she uses. If you want to hear Charlie in his own words speaking to a friend regarding his feelings on Israel, why is a letter, private letter addressed to Benjamin Netanyahu, also not Charlie Kirk in his own words, speaking to, well, maybe not a friend, but someone he considers a friend or someone he can write to, someone who represents a country he cares about, to private letter regarding his feelings on Israel. He talks about the pressure on him. Well, yeah, he also spoke about the pressure on him in that letter, saying, I'm facing so much pressure to turn on Israel. Here's what you need to do so my life can be easier. Isaac wrote, what was the supposed filter in a private letter Kirk himself had authored? Why was Kelly so reticent to admit that Owens had been wrong? Why did she keep conflating Kirk's frustration with other pro-Israel advocates' criticism of him with him turning against Israel itself? By the way, Charlie does say in one sentence of thousands of sentences, he does say in one sentence in the letter, I sometimes get frustrated that if I'm a bit critical of Israel, I get called an anti-Semite. Fair enough. And by the way, I do think, in Megyn Kelly's podcast she refers to, I think Charlie felt the need. He saw there's a divergence happening in the MAGA community. He felt the need to show people, like he did on Megyn Kelly's podcast, that he has his criticism of Israel. And I'm so frustrated when people call me an anti-Semite. But he said at the same time, I think good on him for saying this, he said, number one, this is not representative of how all Jewish people and pro-Israel people react to me. Many people are nuanced and they understand that I can criticize Israel, or if I do, they don't suddenly say I'm terrible or an anti-Semite. And number two, I think this is equally, if not even more important. Charlie said, I understand that there is a deep paranoia in the Jewish community that comes from centuries of persecution where they feel utterly isolated and the world turns on them, as is happening right now with Israel. So it's like we have good reason for being concerned. And I still think, by the way, not always, but many Jewish and pro-Israel people are perfectly reasonable with their questions and question marks. Isaac continues, these were the glaringly obvious questions raised by Kelly's post, which inspired some bipartisan backlash. After one commentator mused that if you can't separate yourself from Candace Owens, many of us are going to separate ourselves from you. Kelly bristled. Look at this, she said. Look, let me just get this up for you as well so you can see this. Look at this. No, I have no obligation to separate myself from anyone. I run my own media company and my own show. That show is where I express my own opinions and I will decide what not to opine on. If you need me to condemn Candace or Tucker for their opinions in order to listen to me, then I may not be for you, she shot back. He's a close friend and she is under enough pressure without gratuitous shots from me. My fight is with the left, not with these two. Folks, would it be gratuitous to criticise a millionaire commentator for using her supposed friend's murder to benefit a years-long anti-Semitic crusade? What if you yourself, another millionaire commentator, had previously amplified an erroneous suggestion they had made? This is the latest example of what is at this point a well-established pattern. Kelly amplifies an inaccurate claim, promotes a meritless theory, or praises a mendacious peer, and then cries victim when she is called out. I have to show you, by the way, that a few other points people have been making. Brandon Tatum, who's terrific, said, why have you just responded to a troll with 300 followers and a fake profile picture? You're taking to heart what is potentially a bot. This guy is, she decides to take up, this is the person that posted this, by the way. Florida dad with 1,230 followers. Why is she amplifying that? Again, this is what I mean by creating straw men arguments as well, by the way. She'll characterize the pro-Israel brigade as saying, I say one thing out of line and you all come down to destroy me. I think she's trying to create a narrative. It seems like because she has a destination, which is some kind of hostility to Israel. Something that I have to say is very amusing is that Nick Fuentes, who is a deep, far, what's the term? Alt-right, anti-Semite. He said, so now we don't care about the letter. Got it. I mean, even he has acknowledged that there's total logical incoherence here. But then this is where it gets really interesting as well, because Konstantin Kisin of Trigonometry, who is terrific, he said the following. He said, because he commented on her tweet saying this, he said, the more one insists that I say what one demands me to, the more committed I get in my refusal. Sorry, that's what Kelly said to Konstantin Kisin, right? And after he inquired about her reaction to the Kirk letter, that's all good and well. No one should be cowed into saying something they don't believe. But at some point, though, shouldn't Kelly address the merits of what people like Owens and Coulson are doing? There's a bit of a bizarre kind of approach here that basically, as Aaron Wexler said, let me just get this quote up. She said, look, the more one insists that I say what one demands me, the more committed I get in my refusal. So Aaron said, I demand that you dig your heels in further. Did that work? I mean, it's so childish. But is it childish? Maybe it's about some kind of agenda. So, very simply, was Owens right or wrong about the letter? Should Coulson have used the occasion of Kirk's memorial to intimate, in a sleazy feline way, as he himself might put it, that the Jews killed Jesus. Is the brilliant Owens, quote-unquote, a credible source on Israel, given the fact that she believed at the outset of the conflict in Gaza that Jerusalem's historic Muslim quarter was a ghetto where the city's Muslims were confined? Was Carlson's targeting of Ben Shapiro over his response to Hamas' October 7th attack fair? What about when Owens suggested that there was a small ring of specific people, quote-unquote, in Hollywood and potentially Washington, D.C., who are, quote, using the fact that they are Jewish to shield themselves from any criticism? Goodness me, if that's what we do to shield ourselves from criticism, it ain't working. What should one make of Carlson's softball interview with an anti-Semitic pastor? Or his being starstruck by World War II and Holocaust revisionist Darryl Cooper? And finally, does she see a worldview articulated by Carlson and Owens that goes beyond the euphemisms she's so fond of? Do they merely take issue with Israeli government policy, or is something else afoot? Kelly feels she has been unfairly maligned, including as an anti-Semite. To be sure, there is a militant contingent of pro-Israel advocates eager to browbeat anyone who might break rank on any issue. It is, as she and Kirk have previously pointed out, a counterproductive exercise. No one ought to try to cancel or silence or bully Kelly into saying something she doesn't believe, or doing something she doesn't want to do. And no one with the power to do so is actually threatening her ability to speak. Kelly is one of the most powerful, influential figures in all of the Fourth Estate. That hardly excuses herself from criticism over her elevation of bad actors and questionable claims, though many of which concern the Jews and the only country in which they constitute a majority. And her willful blindness to the role Carlson and Owens have played in mainstreaming Jew hatred, as well as her indignant, substance-free reaction to any questioning of her association with them, is becoming increasingly indefensible. And I think that is really precisely the point. I'm really not in the business of cancelling people, of calling them out, but I'm going to say things as I see it. I'm going to say when I think you're doing something that is perpetuating dangerous lies and hatred. A few more tweets I want to show you. I've seen a lot of people running defense for Megyn Kelly as an influencer, saying she isn't the same when compared to Tucker or Candace. But fence sitting is a choice. Now, this is important because some people say, well, isn't that just like the whole left-wing silence is violence thing? If you don't want to talk about an issue, don't talk about it. But if you're then going to talk about Candace Owens and what she's saying, particularly with regard to Israel and Charlie, and then you praise her, you're then coming off of the fence already. Having the conviction to take a position is a choice. Sinking the ships as opposed to pacing on the beach wondering what to do is a choice. I hope those who have been falling on their swords for her see this and finally understand where she stands now. Erin Molan said, "My 2 cents, I've admired and respected Megyn Kelly for years." Erin Molan is also an Australian podcaster and former, I think was Sky News host. She's earned the right to do whatever to say whatever she likes, but when she has consistently stated things like being PC, polite and saying nothing when you know it's wrong has gotten us to insert bad thing, and she will not be quiet, no, I will not cede to bullies, sharing and endorsing when Pete Hegseth said, if you can't hold people accountable, you can't change a culture, plus years of rightfully calling out those in the Democratic Party or on the left for their utter hypocrisy in accepting and excusing the very same bad behaviour on their side whilst condemning it mercilessly on the other, then it's legitimate to want to understand more about the position adopted by a very public figure. That seems out of character. I'm not Jewish or Israeli, I'm a Catholic Australian just eager to understand. I'd also argue that none of our battles should ever just be with the left. The ideological battle for Conservatives should be with anyone whose ideas or behaviours threaten to damage the movement we all care so much about and believe in so deeply, and by extension the risk it might have on the safety and prosperity of the world we are fighting so hard to preserve and protect. See, that's one of the things that Megyn Kelly was saying, was that she was saying that, look, my fight is with the left. My fight is with the left, not these two. But as Konstantin Kisin wrote, I think that's in some ways that's just silly labels. Surely if you have a set of values and an ideological position, you want to push that, and people that are trying to take you away from those values, wherever they come from, you should be clear about. Now, she might say, yes, but we have more against the left than the right, and therefore we have to unite. Well, I would say that the kind of stuff that Candace Owens is pushing should be unconscionable. That's just my view. Those are my values. And if you differ from me, then okay, so we're going to differ. So Konstantin Kisin wrote, rightfully, the problem with this approach, which many on the right are taking, is that that's exactly how the left allowed its own extremists to first flourish and then to become the face of the entire movement. If you agree with Candace and Tucker, people will respect that. But to many of us, their behaviour is so extreme, so deranged, that the idea that it can simply be ignored because your fight is with the left doesn't wash. You've always been a great, principled, truth-seeking journalist, so to many of your admirers like me, the question might be, if you agree with them, fine, but if you don't, why isn't your fight with them? So this is where Megyn Kelly wrote, the more one insists that I say what one demands me to, the more committed I get in my refusal, which is just pure childishness, as Konstantin pointed out. I demand nothing of you and I'm coming from a position of great respect. I'm simply asking why it is that you don't believe that lies told by prominent people on the right shouldn't be challenged in the way we all challenge lies told by people on the left. She said, your response proves the opposite of what it purports to. It's just a weird response. Konstantin replied, asking you why you think something proves that I'm demanding something from you? Sorry, asking you why you think something proves that. It's a tricky sentence to say. Asking you why you think something proves that I'm demanding something from you? That doesn't make any sense. Don't you ask people why they think what they think all the time? I think you probably have received a lot of negativity on this and you might be assuming that is my angle of approach. It is not. I'm genuinely curious why you think the way you think about this issue. Of course, if you don't want to answer, that's fine. I'm not demanding anything. Isaac De Castro wrote, really sucks. Tucker Carlson blaming Israel for everything and Candace Owens going on weird rants about the Frankists is not really nice. But freedom of speech, man. What would it say about us if we don't allow anti-Semitism in our ranks? Freedom of speech means that you need to just accept it. And if you criticise it, you must do so politely and while doing a little bow so you don't upset my Jew-hating friends. Know your place, Jew, and don't forget to pay your Dimmy taxes this month. Yeah, the time has come for us to stop cowing to people that are hostile to us. And I think part of what's happening here, actually, if I'm being completely honest with you, is that Jewish people, the Jews, Israel, have seen certain ideologies and political parties and groups as being people that they can trust as their allies, where they have clear values overlap. I think over the years, they've realised that that's not the case, certainly with the left, and now the same thing's happening with the right. I think actually, yes, of course, there's always going to be parts of the right that'll be very pro-Israel, and there'll be people who always are and understand morality, values, truth, all of that. But I think part of what's happening here as well is that the Jewish people, as we approach the Messianic era, there's a sort of a havdalah in Hebrew, a separation that's happening between the Jewish people and the rest of the world. Not in terms of between non-Jews, but between other ideologies. The Jewish people have to realise that they are politically homeless in a sense, that the only ideology, the only set of values that they must consider themselves utterly aligned with is the Torah. And if there's some values overlap between that and other ideologies or parties or groups, great. But I think history, as it always does, is bringing us to realise who we really are at our core. We have to express our Jewish, our Torah values in an undiluted manner. And perhaps that's part of what's happening now. Because the Jewish people do have a unique role in this world. It is to be the light to the nations, which means to be the world's teacher in a world full of students. And that should be a blessing for all of us. And anti-Semitism is a hostility to that, seeing that as some kind of a curse, or just being resentful of it or jealous of that. But actually, if you understand that chosen doesn't mean everyone else is rejected, it means that you're chosen to be the leaders leading the way in humanity of fighting the darkness of this world and bringing God's light to the whole world for all of us to receive and learn from, then that's a wonderful thing. So I actually think that on a cosmic level, this may be what's going on today. And therefore, our advice and the advice of our sages and of the Torah is to stand tall, to stand firm. We know where history is heading. History is heading towards a great destination, which is that the Jewish people will no longer face all this kind of paranoia and concern, but will instead be the light to the nations, and the nations will honor and cherish and treasure that new reality. A quick message before we finish. We have been lied to about the Palestinians from beginning till end. Have a watch of the trailer for our new documentary called The Invention of the Palestinians, How a Nation Was Invented to Destroy Another. And if you want to watch the full thing, just click on the link in the video description. The Palestinians. We have been told they are an ancient people fighting for their homeland which has been stolen from them. This narrative has fueled decades of conflict, painting Israel as an occupier of stolen land. But what if this identity is not of an ancient nation, but a modern, cynical invention? A political construct designed not to build a state, but to dismantle the Jewish one. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to uncover the truth behind the creation of the Palestinian identity, how it was forged in the fires of pan-Arabism, absent in historical records until strategically rebranded in the 1960s by leaders like Egyptian-born Yasser Arafat to rally global opposition against Israel. We'll trace its roots from the Ottoman era, where Palestine was a region without a distinct people, through the pre-1948 years of Arab rejectionism, before focusing on the pivotal shift of the 1960s, when Arafat declared we should now be known as Palestinians, inventing symbols like the flag to mask genocidal aims. This wasn't about self-determination, it was about exploiting refugees, suppressing true aspirations under Arab rule, and perpetuating a war to destroy Israel. Join us as we debunk the myths of an ancient Palestinian nation, expose the strategic manipulation, and reveal how this construct has hindered peace while fueling hate. Fair but firm, this is the story of an identity weaponized, not for building a future, but for erasing one. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.